So I've been building a lot with Firebase recently, doing these mono repos, but I just wanted to show you guys how I'm structuring my projects. So this is the first project that I did, and I did it actually in a very janky way. So here's the index.js where I actually register the routes. But I have API v2 pointing to an Express app. Okay, so I have an Express app, and so I literally have just like routes posted here, and then all of that falls under here for API v2. This is super janky, would not recommend. So here's how I cleaned it up for my next one. For my next build, I still used the backend and then functions folder, but yeah, so first I didn't use an Express app. So this one I went to, these are all my functions. So I do npm start is npm run develop, and then for develop I use nodemon to just run the shell, but it's watching for any updates here. And so functions. So I still have like this two-tiered thing where I have backend and then functions, and then I have a functions folder inside of a functions where I have all of the functionality essentially. So it's kind of awkward. There's no source folder. So here's my third project. I cleaned up the filing a lot. So I pulled everything out here to the API directory. Eventually I could have API v2 if I wanted to do a different project. But all of my config files are at this level. And then I have tests, node modules, source. This is about what you'd expect for some other projects that weren't Firebase projects. And then in register, I'm kind of having to do this a little bit janky thing to import from functions, but I'm trying to just separate everything as much as possible. And then my functions are going to be defined here. Each function file just exports a default on request, which will run an endpoint. And then I have add headers and validate. Validate will return a validation error, and then set 400 if there's a validation error, if there's something wrong with the data. For example, in this case, if they don't include a hiding spot. So this is definitely an improvement in terms of the folder structure, but this file, I'll show you my last project, how I cleaned up this file a little bit. Okay, so now we're here in my last project, and so the way I clean this up is I'm returning a safe endpoint. And so that safe is getting imported from request. I'll show that in just a second. But what that does is it makes me not have to wrap my endpoint in a try catch block. So I just took kind of that same error handling before, where I want to obviously console.log the error. If it's a validation error, return 400. Otherwise, it's an internal server error. And then, but here's my safe. So safe, I'm really just exporting that try catch, which then makes me just be able to export a safe endpoint. And then, here you go. And then one more thing to discuss is I also define a mock endpoint. And that's because I do these are AI-based sites, so if I'm doing like a lot of testing and it does not matter what the response is, then I just, like you can see here, question, what did you eat for breakfast? And then a random string. So I mock the endpoints some of the time, and then the only thing I have to do to change that out is I just have to return mock. And then I save that, and then I'm good to test for a few hours, and then obviously before the deploy, come back in here. With this architecture, I would definitely move forward with Firebase. I'm having a hard time using Firebase for their documentation being horrible, and it seems like they've also changed a lot of their patterns within the past however long GPT got trained, because ChatGPT sometimes puts out deprecated code that doesn't actually work with Firebase and Firestore. As a database, I'm starting to migrate over to using Supabase just because the documentation is better. I have a feeling I'm probably going to end up going with someone else for serverless functions as well. I really like iterating really fast, so I'm definitely going for serverless functions. But yeah, let me know who you guys recommend for serverless function provider, and then also authentication. Right now I don't have a lot of users, so I'm thinking I'm just gonna delete the auth database and just move it all into Supabase, just because I feel less boxed in with Supabase. I just kind of trust them more. It sounds like they're open source, they're not Google. But let me know who you guys prefer for serverless functions. Yeah.